episode is sponsored by Phinney Design Group. Welcome back to Destination Saratoga All Access, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes with the people shaping Saratoga County's vibrant culture, rich history, and thriving community. I'm your host, Mackenzie Zarzycki. Before we dive into the interview, be sure to check out our latest episode featuring the Mostly Modern Festival at Skidmore College. The festival runs June 5th to the 20th and offers an incredible lineup of contemporary classical music you won't want to miss. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by renowned architect and sustainability advocate Mike Phinney. Founder and principal of Phinney Design Group, Mike has made a lasting impact on our region through his thoughtful, environmentally conscious approach to design. From his roots in the Adirondacks to award-winning projects like the Coat Room right here in Saratoga Springs, Mike brings creativity, intention, and a deep sense of place to everything he does. Now let's get into the interview. Welcome back to the Destination Saratoga All Access podcast. I'm your host, Mackenzie Zarzycki, and today I'm in the Coat Room with Mike Phinney. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. This room is so beautiful. I couldn't have asked for a better location for today's podcast. So let's talk a little bit about you. You are the principal and owner of Phinney Design Group, and you're also a co-owner of the Coat Room. How did you get started in architecture?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. Well, I was always really artistic since sort of age 5. I'd like to draw, and one of my early babysitters was an art major at a local college, and so she would, to keep me busy, was like, "Oh, why don't you draw and do things like that?" And I did some things, and she thought they were really good for a 5-year-old,
Yeah.
And she brought it to her art class. And so she really encouraged me to draw and to be artistic. And, you don't really understand it at that age, but it definitely lit a fire. And so I was very artistic my whole life. I actually had an art teacher. I said, I'm going to be an artist when I graduate, when I get out of high school. And he's like, you don't want to be an artist.
Oh.
He was like, it's a really tough road.
Yeah. They say starving artists, right?
Right. And, that was like the first big kind of punch in the face reality about that. I ended up being really good in science and math as well. And I had a guidance counselor who encouraged me to consider architecture. And I did and researched it. And I actually went to, there was like a summer program where you go down and visit at RPI and you visit
very cool.
architecture studios. And I went and spent a couple of days just kind of seeing what kids were doing down there. And I was just hooked. So at 15 years old, I decided I kind of knew I wanted to be an architect.
That's amazing. Not many 15-year-olds know what they want to do for the rest of their life. I certainly did it. You grew up in Lake George. Did you have a connection to the outdoors, and how did you bring that into architecture?
Yeah, I had a really strong connection to the outdoors. I even since being like a little kid, I just wanted to be outdoors. I had kind of endless energy as a kid. I think it was one of the things that drove my parents crazy. But I would get up at 5 a.m. every day, just ready to go, and without any alarm. And oftentimes I was out, in the woods or running around or doing whatever. And back then it was kind of a different world. This was the 70s, and it was sort of like, okay, just be home for dinner. It was kind of like the thing. And you rode your bike around, you went out in the woods, you went exploring. Sometimes you got lost, but that's what I did. And that grew into a love for hiking and camping and all those things.
I remember even as a kid being able to go out and ride your bike, and then it's like the dinner bell, it's time to come home,
Right.
But now it's like, I think I'd put an AirPod or an Air tag on my kids wherever they went, because it's just so scary these days. You never know what's going to happen. But Lake George is so beautiful. It's only about 30 minutes north of here. So you came to Saratoga. How did that all transpire?
Yeah, it's kind of a roundabout way. Growing up, Saratoga was where you went to concerts, and then you went to Pope's Pizza after, and then you went home.
Pope's.
Right? I don't know if you when it was right downtown.
It still is.
Yeah.
Cash only.
And, that was like the hangout, especially for teenage kids, so I didn't know a lot about Saratoga until I was in college. And I played football at RPI as well. And I was in a fraternity that was a lot of football players, Theta Chi, and a bunch of the upperclassmen were working in Saratoga in the summertime, bouncing and bartending and things like that. And the one place that a lot of them worked was the Metro. So I guess once I was 21 years of age and I, could come up and hang out in Saratoga, I started to discover, what it was like up here as, more of as an adult. Mm-hmm. And experiencing the restaurants, the entertainment, the track, the history. And then I guess it was my senior year, my last year in architecture school, where I was dating a girl who was from Saratoga. Okay. And so I ended up, being up here a lot and really, really loved it. I was like, wow, I just didn't realize what an incredible city this was. Yeah. And, it was right in my backyard kind of my whole life. And I ended up interning for an architecture firm in Albany and then working there for a little bit. And then I got a job offer for a architecture firm in Saratoga.
Very cool.
And then I moved here, lived here, full time. I lived on a 4th floor walk-up apartment on Broadway, and I walked to work every day for, a number of years. And then I really, really got hooked.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I really haven't left since.
So you moved to Saratoga in your 20s. You worked for a local architecture firm.
Yes.
When did you start Phinney Design Group? And tell us about that location specifically.
I started Phinney Design Group technically in fall 2002. I resigned from the job that I was at then. I had studied sustainable design, or really at the time, environmental awareness in architecture is what I did my thesis on in college.
Very cool.
And so I was very passionate about buildings respecting the environment and whatever that is, whether it's a natural environment, whether it's an urban environment. I was halfway through building my house, and I had a builder that was helping me build it. I was interviewing for a project, and his client was a guy named Richard Leifer and his wife, Jane. And Jane was a recent cancer survivor, and she had been diagnosed with chemical sensitivities. Oh. And part of my research, a lot of my research was on indoor air quality and why indoor air quality in buildings can be really bad in some instances, particularly in the 80s, right? Because they had the energy crisis, and they said, all right, make buildings super tight, and we're going to not let you open any windows. Yeah. And then we're going to put a bunch of things in the buildings that emit kind of bad stuff, right? And you're kind of breathing in all this stuff, particularly formaldehyde, which was in everything, was in furniture, foam, glues, MDF, everything that office furniture is made of had this urea formaldehyde kind of foam or glue in it, which was making people really sick. Some people really sick. And so I knew a lot about that. They came and met with me, and we just started talking about what their goals for their house is. And they had a big Victorian in town. They were moving out of town to Matty Groves. They wanted a rural life. They wanted a smaller house. Their kids were grown, and they wanted gardens, but they didn't. I mean, they wanted a very, very healthy home and an energy efficient home and things. And so I just started talking to them about it, and they're like, would you design our home for us? And I said, I can't do that because I work for this firm, and we don't do residential work. We do these kind of big buildings, and office buildings and college and university buildings, and moonlighting is really frowned upon. It's not something I would do. And he really wouldn't take no for an answer. He was just sort of like, well, you can be a consultant then, you know. I was like, okay, but I can't stamp anything. I can't be architect of record,
Yeah.
And I agreed to be a consultant, and I started. These guys, I used to work 10, 11 hours a day and then commute home. And this couple would meet me at my apartment at 8, 9 o'clock at night, and we would just talk about what they want to do, what they want to accomplish in their house. And after, I don't know, a month or two of that, I would come home from a long day and meet with him. And sometimes my day was on my face, you know, and he would be like, hey, what's going on? And, I just start telling him good and bad. And he just he knew I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't seem happy. And I was like, well, I'm not really,
Yeah.
He says, well, why don't you just start your own company? And he's a very entrepreneurial minded guy. And he's like, you got a ton of talent. You should just do it. And I was like, here I am, 30 years old, just signed on for a mortgage, just got married, thinking about maybe trying to have kids in a couple of years. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm ready to take that kind of risk,
Yeah.
And he kind of convinced me it was the right thing to do. And I went to my wife, Marcy, and I was like, hey, I think I'm going to quit my job and start my own company out of our apartment. And I have one client, which is this guy, and it worked out. I ended up designing his house, and it really, I had the absolute best experience possible with a client. They kind of inspired that path, and that's kind of how it started. And I officially incorporated Phinney Design Group in 2003.
That's amazing. That's such a great story. It seems very serendipitous that you met them. They had the RPI background. You have the RPI background, and he convinced you to follow your passion. You could have done commercial, big building architecture your whole life, but you really were inspired by this green architecture, making houses more efficient, making them clean. That's very, very important.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're ahead of your time a little bit in that, because nowadays everyone's talking about the environment, trying to conserve energy. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when I started my own company, I was sort of known as a regional expert in that, and I knew that was sort of a niche, and so I got hired by other design firms sometimes to just consult them, and it was a real expertise at the time. I think most design firms now have a pretty good knowledge of it, or they should anyway.
Yeah.
But and the materials and technology that's available is much more commonplace. Like back, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, you had to really look for those kinds of things.
Now, here's a quick message from our sponsor. Phinney Design Group is a multidisciplinary architecture, interior design, green building consulting, and construction management firm with a focus on sustainable and environmentally responsible construction methods. The group is headquartered in a sustainable green building located on the corner of Beekman Street and Grand Ave in the historic Dublin neighborhood of Saratoga Springs. Also known as the Beekman Street Arts District, they're actually located right above the Local, one of my favorite Irish pubs or taverns in Saratoga Springs. From architecture to interior design, landscape design to land use analysis, urban planning to rural planning, Phinney Design Group has a long and accomplished track record of coordinating projects from the design phase through completion and construction, all while maintaining environmentally friendly standards. What an honor it is to be able to build houses for generational families, something that parents can pass down to their children and their grandchildren. What does that experience mean to you?
It is a huge honor. I mean, architecture and interior design and construction, which we do all those things, they're a tough profession. There's a lot of pressure. There's deadlines. There's a lot of liability. If things go wrong, people make mistakes, It's a lot, and sometimes it can be stressful, and sometimes you're staring at the ceiling at night saying, are we doing everything right, and did I get that design right, and did I miss something? It's a profession where you work really hard for a long time before there's really any kind of large financial payback. You really have to be committed. So I tell my staff all the time. I said the most rewarding thing though about our profession is that you have these moments with clients where it's move-in day. I've had clients come up to me and hug me crying because it's beyond what they thought was possible, and sometimes, I'll even have clients say, I didn't realize you did this or did that, or because as an architect, one of your jobs is to visualize it right in your head. We have technology now that makes it a lot easier to visualize things and make sure your clients can visualize it. But, there's things that we think about that, sometimes is, it's not in everyone else's head. Yeah. Right. Or you've captured a view, or you've, the way the light comes in, or the way the materials look together. But, a lot of times, people are, can be kind of overwhelmed with gratitude of what you created for them, especially, in the case where it's a multi-generational thing where they know, hopefully this is where my kids are going to come back to visit, and their kids, hopefully, and who knows how many further generations.
That's amazing. That's a really cool thing to be a part of, especially when you say, it takes a long time to get where you're going. It's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And when you can have those rewarding moments, makes it feel all worth it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone needs to make money and pay their bills, but then it's like, what about my job do I find rewarding? Yeah. Beyond a paycheck, you know, and that's a big one.
And you're helping the environment. With everything you're doing in little increments, whether it's a brewery or a restaurant or a residential house, you are making little impacts each time to help the environment. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Yes, of course. So Phinney has a very distinct design. When you're in Saratoga County and beyond, and you see a Phinney property or a Phinney building, it stands out, I think, at least. Can you talk about some of the properties that you've done or locations that, have that unique Phinney look?
There was never an intention that like, hey, I wanted to have each project and so like people know it's distinctly a Phinney project, you know? Like a Frank Lloyd Wright. Like that's very distinct style, right? Or Michael Graves or who, kind of these architects have these really distinct styles. Yeah. And for me, I think there's a diversity in our work, but it is interesting that people find common threads between them still. Yeah.
For me, it's just the exceptional craftsmanship. Like whether you're at Common Roots, which you guys designed, right? Yeah. So after the fire and they rebuilt, that place is immaculate. Right. Everything there is very well designed. It's beautiful. It's functional. It's a great space. To sitting in this building, you were talking about the sound panels and the lighting. It's just so much thought goes into the experience. Right. And I think that sets you apart from other architects and construction companies because you've thought about everything. You want the experience to be amazing. And you can see it. You can feel it.
Well, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do.
I love it. I love it.
On every project. Yeah. And we've gone after things and won them, like we did a library in Manchester and we did, we went after the master plan for the New York Racing Association. We did the complete master plan design for the whole track there and even are working at Belmont. And, I didn't have any sports, sports buildings, stadiums, grandstands, any of that kind of experience. I had very little experience with any kind of horse racing industry. But what really won us the job with the CEO at the time and their consultant that was kind of putting the team together was we had done all the renovations at the Sagamore.
Yes, another beautiful property.
And I used that in the interview. I said, hey, listen, I think Saratoga Racetrack is a lot like the Sagamore. It's gone through this constant evolution, right? Like Sagamore's on its third version and it's been added onto and it's modified and but the core essence of it has always remained intact. And I said, so I understand you want to modernize the facilities here and add on and add other, amenities and other venues, but the history and the core essence of the Saratoga Racetrack has to be maintained.
100%.
And I didn't realize that like that was their number one concern, right? So it ended up we ended up getting the job, and so that's happened quite a bit, I mean,
was that the 1863 Club, that whole addition on the top?
Well, we did all the original schematic design for that. We did what's called a master plan, so we actually designed probably 20 different projects to be done at the track over a period of time. And at the time they conceived it as a 10-year master plan. And, different leadership, different boards have come and gone but a lot of that plan has been followed. And 1863 is probably one of the
that
main
building's
ones.
Beautiful. And even though everything inside is fresh and modern, like you said, the exterior still mimics the grandstands.
Yeah,
it looks great together.
Yeah, and I have to give credit to Herf Architects, because they ended up, them and a New York City firm, I'm forgetting their name, but they ended up kind of taking the schematics that we did and turned it into what it is today.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so great. That's so great. So when it comes to now you've done some commercial and residential, where's your passion? If you could just pick a project that you'd want to work on, what draws you?
Well, it's interesting. We have 5 offices now. So we have 2 in Saratoga. We have our main office, which is over the local, and that's kind of been the mothership for 18 years or better. But we ran out of space there, and so we opened a satellite in Troy. I lived in Troy for 7 years, and I've really loved that city a lot. The historic architecture that's there, that's intact, is pretty amazing. And so we're doing some really interesting work down there. And then we have a satellite office in Lake Placid, and we're doing work up there. My parents have retired and moved back to Elizabethtown. They've reconnected with childhood friends. And so that was one of the reasons I opened that, so I could visit them more often. And we've been hired to do a bunch of work up there. Most recently, we were hired to modernize the bobsled, luge, and skeleton track and associated buildings. There was a chance they were going to get the Olympics. That Cortina the sliding facilities might not be ready. And so, that was, pretty great project to be involved with. That's design. They're under construction, parts of it now. Looks like Cortina is going to be ready, so it may not host the Olympics, but we'll be hosting world championships for generations to come, which is pretty exciting. But our satellite office in New York City, partly there because my brother owns a construction company there. He worked for Turner for many years, and his boss and mentor did as well, and they spun off and started their own company. And what's really interesting is, because of the way the world's working now, post-COVID, there's all this workspaces, and the traditional office, go to the office every day, is changing, especially in New York City. Yeah. And so you have this overabundance of office space in New York City. And other smaller cities too. And developers are starting to say, okay, well, what are we going to do? And so you have these buildings that were the buildings I didn't want to do anymore. Yeah. And they're like, we got to breathe new life into them.
Absolutely.
And so looking at projects where you take an entire building and basically gut the inside and turn it into residences and entertainment venues and restaurants, and so you kind of create these multi-use buildings that were all offices at one time. And so that's something I'm really interested in and pursuing.
And probably making them better for the environment, more energy efficient, all those things too.
Correct. And
that's great.
And we're doing a miniature version of that in Troy. It's a 2-story brick, suburban kind of office building that was, part of urban renewal, where it looks like a building from an office park in the middle of downtown Troy. And we bought it, and we're gutting it, and we're putting a mass timber skeleton down through it. Oh, cool. And adding a story and a half of mass timber, full photovoltaic array, geothermal heating and cooling. Will be a net zero energy building. So we're going to take a really kind of antiquated, kind of ugly 2-story brick box suburban office building and show what you can do to it to revitalize it in a downtown urban environment. So
I love that. My mom had this epic brick arch in her kitchen, and the stove was underneath of it. Right. And it's the only, now you see it more. I feel like a lot of people are reverting back to like country or French versus the very modern white kitchen with all stainless steel appliances. But I just love brick. It's so pretty. Now, here's a quick message from our sponsor. I want to take a moment to talk about the Coat Room, Saratoga's best kept secret and speakeasy. Tucked away on Broadway, the Coat Room brings a cozy, intimate vibe with handcrafted cocktails, gourmet bites, and top-notch service. Whether you're unwinding after a long day or just starting for a big night out, this is your invitation to step back in time and dine in style. Hosting a celebration or special gathering, the Coat Room is also available for private events. No password needed, just follow the coats. For hours, menus, and upcoming events, Visit thecoatroom.com.
So we've talked about history, we've talked about big buildings, commercial buildings. Today, we're sitting here in the Coat Room, which was built on the site of the historic United States Hotel. How did the past influence your design choices for today?
Well, it influenced it in a major way. I think, I was originally hired to design the building, the whole building, and working for Tom Newkirk and Peter Rosecrans. And, we did a lot of historical research and sort of what was here. And we kind of pitched the idea of, kind of playing off that era.
Yeah.
But, we don't want to copy anything. We're kind of echoing it in a modern way. And right away, they loved that idea. So that's sort of what drove the design of the exterior of the building. Mm-hmm. But then, there was 2 retail spaces up front. And this space originally was reserved for in case one of the retail tenants had a large inventory requirement.
Okay.
Right. So this being kind of a landlocked space, it's no exterior windows, that kind of thing.
Yep.
It was, originally conceived to be a storeroom for the
retail.
The retail, and the retail components that came in didn't need that much space. We were just kind of talking one day, and Peter and I, and when we travel, we were talking about some of the places we go to, and we went to a mass timber conference
sounds fun.
Together. It was pretty fun. It was in Portland, Oregon. And there's a, so when I travel to like big cities, I try to go to places like this, which are kind of off the beaten path. But again, usually it's a business related thing. So I want to be able to have a conversation. I want to have, I'm not looking to have a lot of drinks these days. I'm looking to have a couple of drinks, and, I want them to be unique and really interesting and really well crafted, and, and good food, mm-hmm. and unique food. And so, I would go to New York or Chicago, Portland, some of these places, and I kind of seek out places like this. Mm-hmm. And Peter and I started talking about it, and he's like, oh, there's a great place in Miami. And I'm like, what we should do a speakeasy style restaurant.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it in Saratoga, and kind of have it be hidden in the back of the lobby. And he's like, I love the idea. And so we said, yeah, let's do it. And so they, those guys trusted me to design and build this space. And then the Coat Room was born.
I love it. And it definitely is hidden, other than the one emblem on the front of the building,
right, with
the CR. But it's great. It's just so beautiful. And I love that you really dove into the Coat Room name. Like, you walk in and you see a bunch of coats. It is very speakeasy vibe. The only one that I'm aware of in Saratoga. I very much enjoy coming here. You did mention something about being able to have a business conversation, or just a conversation in general.
Right.
A lot of times we go out to eat or to restaurants, and it's so noisy, and you feel like you have to scream at each other, right, to be able to hear one another speak. Can you talk about what you did in here design-wise to make it such an intimate, private, warm, cozy place?
Yeah, well, first we broke the space up into kind of these series of rooms, right? So you have the booths, but they're really tucked into their own mini room.
Yeah.
And we put a high sound absorbing ceiling in those nooks, and then out in the main space, much higher ceilings, and that whole ceiling is coated with an acoustical a foam, sound absorbing foam that then was painted. And then a lot of hung fabric wrapped high absorbing sound panels are tucked in the ceiling, but they kind of blend in.
Yeah, you can't even see them.
And so, and then even the furniture, like the chairs here, are like a felt that's kind of high sound absorbing. We put curtains in that are sound absorbing. And wall panels that are like we have a private conference room that's the whole all the walls are surrounded. So you go in there and close the door, and you're 5 feet from the bar. You can hardly hear a crowd at a bar.
That's amazing.
So, and that was just one thing that I really thought about because of my experiences in other places. You can go into like really high end fine dining places, and acoustics aren't even thought about.
Yeah.
And it gets so loud if it's busy, which those places, if they're good, they are, and you can't even hear yourself talk.
Yeah.
You're kind of yelling at your guests the whole time.
This place is so unique. Like if you wanted to have a, private romantic dinner, you could sit in a booth. You mentioned conference rooms. So small groups, maybe CEOs or, board of directors could come in. You have TVs you can hook up in there, right? With your laptop and do a presentation, to the private space right upstairs. And then the rooftop. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, rooftop's pretty exciting. We designed the rooftop originally, as a kind of an amenity for all the tenants in the building, including the commercial tenants. And then, what happened was, I guess it was this last summer, the second summer we were open, we had tenants in the building asking us if we could cater stuff on the roof. And we said, yeah, we would love to do that. And looked into, the permits to do that. And so last year was kind of, by event. And we realized that this is really something we could do regularly. So this year we have all the permits in place to be open regularly, and we'll be open Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights every weekend as long as it's not pouring rain.
Yeah, I love that. A great view. The only other rooftop, City Tavern has probably one of the oldest rooftops, but the Cantina has been very successful with their rooftop. When it's nice out, summertime, everyone's there. So I envision the same thing happening here.
Yeah, and this is by far the largest. I think it's 3 times larger than any rooftop in Saratoga, and much, much higher. You can see the Green Mountains of Vermont from up there. It's really, very cool. Really pretty special place.
I can't wait to check it out. I know you have a derby party coming up.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't rain.
I think you've said before that architecture is a lot about storytelling. What story were you trying to tell with the coat room?
Well, you mentioned where we're sitting right now was you were approximately would have been in the lobby of the United States Hotel. Yes. And I love history and everything about it, and especially Saratoga history, which is really just amazing. And people, the United States Hotel was the second largest hotel in the United States at the time, over 1,000 rooms. The largest hotel was the Grand Union Hotel, which was just a block away. So you had the 2 largest hotels in the United States right here. You had
Isn't that crazy?
You had
Saratoga Springs.
Yeah, and you had the wealthiest people in America. You had all the big luminaries in entertainment and writing and literature. You had Yaddo getting, kind of Pulitzer Prize winning people staying.
Yeah, artist retreats.
Yeah, you had kind of this incredible gathering of American success stories, right? That came here to relax and have fun and entertain. And Saratoga, people will say, oh, it's getting built up too much. It's like, no, it was, these buildings were 7, 8 stories tall. Saratoga was much more developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Yeah. And it, unfortunately, fire and the Depression destroyed a lot of buildings that got torn down or were burned down by, and it's kind of building back again. But we tried to celebrate that era here in the coat room, right? Yeah. So all the pictures you see here are all pictures from Saratoga. A lot are from of the United States Hotel, the grand opening of the hotel. Some of the characters here that were here. There was a porch that was called Millionaires Row, where Vanderbilt and Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie, they were all guests of the hotel, and they would meet in the summertime and talk about what's going on in the world and in business. And they were often spotted together on this porch, and the porch was nicknamed Millionaires Row. It'd be kind of like the equivalent of Jeff Bezos and you know, Elon Musk and like, you know, these kind of like visionaries today would be like, okay, we're gonna go to Saratoga every summer. We're gonna hang out on the porch together and talk about things.
Wouldn't that be spectacular?
It would be spectacular.
Now here's a quick message from our sponsor, Saratoga Springs. Are you ready to really know the Belmont Stakes? Get the insider's edge at Embrace the Belmont 2 on Tuesday, June 3rd at Universal Preservation Hall. You can sound like a racing pro, no experience required. Join MC Donna Brothers of NBC Sports and a panel of experts to get you Belmont ready. Tickets are just $57, a nod to the 157th running of the Belmont Stakes. Tickets include cocktails and small bites. Want the VIP experience? Snag a $157 VIP ticket for exclusive time with our handicappers and local leaders before the main event. Last year's event sold out. Tickets will go fast again this year, so don't miss out. Get your tickets today. And it's all for a great cause. 100% of the proceeds benefit Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga, helping our community through the beauty of horse and human connection. Get your tickets now. Don't miss your chance to embrace the Belmont like a true racing fan. Visit thsaratoga.org or search Embrace the Belmont for tickets.
Well, you know, I think when Prohibition came, that changed things a lot.
Yeah.
And thus the birth of the speakeasy. But there were several places from what I know, and around Saratoga Lake was sort of where they popped up, where they were full-blown casinos.
Wow.
You know, and bars and everything else associated with it that you can imagine of that time. And then I guess there was some hurt feelings as far as how much business one group was taking over the other.
Yeah.
And so I guess it was burned down. You know, but there was a little tiff there that and ended up getting rid of one of them. But there's actually some of them are still around, and one of them in particular has been turned into a house that I'm aware of, and some friends of ours owned it for a while, and you go in and you can tell it was set up to have two kind of casino floors, right?
Wow.
Because there were two big living room parlors, and then big kitchen in the back and things. And so, you know, it's pretty neat.
Cool.
Pretty neat to see that stuff. Yeah.
We're bringing it back full circle.
Yeah. And it's interesting is, you know, this will be our third summer we're open, because we opened in June. And a couple years ago, but it's interesting. We're still getting a lot of people who are like, I had no idea this place was here, you know?
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, I'm happy because I want it to be the kind of that hidden thing gem, but also you're like, hey, come check us out. It's pretty fun here.
I mean, as a local, I love it. I've come for brunch. I've come for dinner.
Brunch is my favorite.
The brunch is so good.
The food here, I mean, people know us for our cocktails. I think, you know, because they're so unique and they're really crafted, but the food is really the same way. We change the food and cocktail menu every season, and we do things based on what's in season.
Yep.
We, all the bread here we make ourselves. The dough for the flatbread we make ourselves. We make our own butter. It's really a full scratch kitchen.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's very unique. Anything from a little charcuterie to, something more hearty. The drinks, all of the drinks are so good, so special, so unique. Jesse and I came here for the 2-for-1 espresso martinis a couple Thursdays ago. Maddie hooked us up. It was very good.
Yeah, people have told us that's the best one in town, but it's, I'm a little biased, so I can't be that guy to say that. But.
I mean, I think they're pretty good.
Thanks.
So, it's a fad. Everyone's making them now.
Yeah.
Nine Maple has all sorts of great martinis. So if you can compete with Nine Maple, in my opinion, you're doing well.
Oh, thanks.
They do a good job too.
They do. They sure do. Yeah.
And they usually have jazz too there.
They do. Yep. That's been one of my favorite places since I came here, for sure.
I think that was the closest thing to like a speakeasy without being a speakeasy. It still had that old vibe.
Yep.
The bartenders are always dressed. And you guys do a good job too. Like everyone here is dressed nice. Not 1800s garb, but very like chic Victorian.
Yeah. We have the bibs and with all their bar tools and things kind of handy. And they really are. it's interesting is bartending is starting to shift, right? I mean, you still have places where you're trying to pour beers as fast as possible, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine too. But the more of the cocktail style bar is it's really starting to become an art in itself, and I'm always checking out places like that, and I'm always kind of sometimes like really surprised at what people come up with.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, we hosted a mommy mocktail event here a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, how fun!
And we were sold out, and it was all non-alcoholic, but we did some really awesome mocktails. And everyone, it was great because they all came in the sort of 1920s garb.
Oh, yeah.
And so they really had fun with it, and we did too.
Bringing it back to Saratoga history, is there a person who lived here or a quote that inspires you?
I think there's two people one that lived here and did a lot here, and then one that a former president that spent a lot of time here and invested here. But obviously you have the Vanderbilts and you have the Trask family and things like that. And I would probably say there's three people. So the Trask family, but in particular Katrina Trask, who faced such tragedy, right? Mm-hmm. And her husband, Spencer, was the largest owner of the largest railroad company in the United States. So, had accumulated pretty massive wealth. He had built what is now called Yaddo. That was their family home, and he had two daughters. And Spencer was killed in a train crash, and unfortunately the children died young from disease, and so Katrina was left as a widow with no heirs, and so she founded the first of its kind, artist retreat, and then you look at what that has created as far as the legacy there and the people that have come through there. Just unbelievable. And as someone who's an artist, so that's really inspiring to me. And then, we did get hired to design the 5 artist studios there. Oh, cool. And Elena Richardson, who's the director there, she had this vision that there's a historic Yaddo and then there's new Yaddo, and new Yaddo needs to be 21st century. It needs to be modern. It needs to be state of the art. And the two will talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that vision was really cool. Yeah. And she let us really do some cool, super modern, sculptural little studios in there. And so that for me, and then John Haynes worked with me on that. And for us to now be part of that story, that legacy, part of Yaddo's story is really special to me. Yeah. And there's so many quotes from Katrina that, it's hard to pick one, but, and then the other character is Jim Morrissey, who's this Irish immigrant. He's kind of this tough guy. He's
boxer dude.
He's a boxer. I was a boxer, believe it or not.
I can see that.
In my younger days. And so he was a member of the Dead Rabbits, which was this sort of Irish gang in New York. And he decides to come up to Saratoga and try to make a go of it. And, he builds the Canfield Casino. He does a lot of things, but he's kind of the guy that got the people from New York up here and saw this as an escape for that. And that legacy, I think, lives on in many ways. And, he was, he got a nickname, Old Smoke, because he was still, I guess, making his way. Initially, he was still bare-fisted boxing behind bars for money. And he was in a match, and apparently they had a big wood stove outside to keep people kind of warm that were gathered around watching the bout. And he, the way the story goes is he got hit and knocked over, and he landed like kind of on the wood stove and burned his back. And he leaned forward and kept fighting, but his back was steaming from the being burned. And so he got the nickname Old Smoke Morrissey. And you think about characters like that, really just crazy grit.
I've never heard that story.
And he involved in so much in Saratoga, and then eventually the founding of the racetrack. And then, but I think that there's a Teddy Roosevelt, I think, is the most inspirational character I've had, and he was, he spent a lot of time in and around Saratoga, and he's the one who really built, the New Deal built the park, Saratoga Park, and it led to SPAC and everything that's there. And he has a quote called "Man in the Arena," and I put the quote right at the door here at our hostess station. And so, if there's one quote that in my whole life I've read that really speaks to me, it's the Man in the Arena.
Can you tell us the quote?
It's a long quote, so I'm going to read it to make sure I get it right.
I'm going to buckle in.
Okay, so it's Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, April 23rd, 1910. And it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
I feel like every entrepreneur, every person leaving college, that's like your...
It's interesting. I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, and they're smart kids, and they try hard, and they're in sports, but they're both like really hard on themselves. And it's not something that we like as parents, like, you must be great, or you must, achieve, or you got to be the best, or any of those things. They just naturally do that. And I've done it my whole life too. And so's Marcy. And, there's a balance there, right? That's a blessing and a curse, because there's times when, that can kind of eat you alive, because, no matter what you do, or you have a failure, you're like, oh God, I suck at this, and, I don't know if I can do this. And, I think that's a natural thing that every single person deals with. And some deal with it, on a daily basis. It's something that they're constantly questioning. And I try to, and I had to find my own path through that myself, but I try to tell them, like, listen, it's the classic thing, like, just try your best, but there's a lot of truth in it. It's like, hey, you're definitely going to fail if you don't try. Right. Or if you don't. And that's what I love most about that quote is like, sometimes it's the fear of failure, or the fear of criticism will hold people back. And it's like, well, then you definitely have failed, right?
Exactly.
Because you didn't even try.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's more about like, hey, go for it, try. You're not going to be successful at everything. It's part of life. You're going to fail at things. You're going to fail probably a lot. Yep. But that's the stuff that teaches you things, and that's the stuff that kind of guides you to be successful.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's the mantra you lived by, starting, with architecture, starting with art, pivoting to architecture, going to RPI, starting in a firm that you didn't love, but bringing those tools with you to create your own company that's been around now for 18, 20 years. Everything you've done from residential to commercial to sports. I mean, it seems like there is no not try in your nature, right? You're willing to try anything. And at the end of the day, you're going to put your heart and soul in it. And if the people are happy and the environment is taken care of, we consider it a success.
Yeah. And you have to measure success in different ways too, right? It's kind of what I was talking about before, is there's, things that are rewarding, that are rewarding, that have nothing to do with money, right? And finding, joy in those moments too.
That's so great. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation today. I think what Phinney does for the community, Saratoga County, is tremendous. I've learned so much about you and the green architecture and the history of the coat room. I'm so grateful to have this time to chat with you today. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really honored to be here and really appreciated my time with you.
Of course. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Mike Phinney of Phinney Design Group at the Coat Room, where we explored architecture, sustainability, and multi-generational homes. We also touched on Saratoga's legendary speakeasies, both past and present. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe so you never miss the latest on what's happening in and around Saratoga. Have a guest or topic in mind? We'd love to hear from you. Just send us a note at podcast@discoversaratoga.org. Until next time, keep exploring, and we hope to see you in Saratoga. This episode is sponsored by Phinney Design Group. This podcast is brought to you by Discover Saratoga, the official tourism promotion agency of Saratoga County, produced by Bright-Sided Media, with video by Iron Glass Productions, and special thanks to Lift Marketing for their continued support.